Hello and welcome to the Tea Rush. My name is Matthew and today I will be reviewing the Willsence Temperature Control Gooseneck Kettle. I'm going to be comparing it against my Fellow Stagg EKG. Now this review will be mostly geared towards tea drinkers, but both of these can be used for pour over coffee as well. The biggest difference between these two kettles, first of all, is their price point. The Fellow Stagg EKG is priced around $150, and that will vary a little bit based upon the color that you get. Whereas the Willsence, I bought on Amazon for around $68. Right now, I just saw it's on sale at Walmart for $45. So if that is still going on, you might be able to get a great bargain on it. Both of these kettles have exact temperature control, meaning you can set them to the exact degree that you want, either in Celsius or Fahrenheit. If you want to brew at 73 degrees Celsius, you can do that. Most kettles on the market have maybe 5, 6 preset settings on the temperature that you have to choose from. And if you want to brew at a temperature somewhere in between those two temperatures, you're just out of luck. So this is what really makes these kettles unique. That, and they both have the gooseneck, which makes for a much nicer pour than, say, a kettle like this that does not have it. The other thing that both of these have in common is they have a hold function, meaning it will hold the temperature of the water at that exact degree for a certain amount of time. Now on the Fellow, you can choose that time to either be 30 or 60 minutes, whereas on the Willsence, it's 2 hours. Other things they have in common is that they are both the same size. They both hold approximately 0.9 liters of water. They also have 1200 watts of power, and so heating water up from room temperature to boiling takes almost the exact same amount of time. I timed both of them, and they both came in around 6 minutes. Now, what are some of the things that I think the Fellow Stagg EKG does better than the Willsence? First of all, design is the big one. You look at the Fellow and it just looks gorgeous. It's almost a work of art. This is something that when you have it out on your counter, on your shelf, it's just a joy to look at. It goes along really well if you have other fancy teaware out. It fits right in with that. Now, the Willsence took some of those design aspects that the Fellow made and incorporated it. But as you can see, it's just not quite as crisp, clean, and minimalist as the Fellow EKG. The other thing is the build quality of the two. The Fellow is just built much better. One of the obvious things that I'd like to point out is just the lids. Whereas the Fellow, it takes a little bit of resistance to get the lid off. On the Willsence, it's barely on there at all. So if you take a look at the actual thickness of the lid, you can see that the Willsence is much thinner. And when you start to use them, you notice that this build quality really holds for every aspect of the kettle. The knob here just seems a lot cheaper on the Willsence than the knob on the Fellow. Also, when they are heating up, because the build quality is so much better on the Fellow, it's much quieter. Now, the Willsence isn't loud like some other kettles that I've used that sound like jet engines going off, but it is noticeably louder than the Fellow. One of the things that I think the Willsence does better is a notification when the water has reached the temperature that you'd like to brew at. So if you set it to 80 degrees, as soon as the kettle gets to 80 degrees, it's going to beep to let you know it's ready. The Fellow does not have this, and it can be quite annoying because, I'll set the temperature on the kettle and it'll start warming up, and I know it'll take a couple minutes, so I'll go in the other room, and then it won't notify me when it gets to that temperature, and I'll forget about it. And then an hour later, I'll be like, oh yeah, I turned the kettle on to brew some tea. So it's just a minor thing like that. It's very convenient and noticeable. Now, when it comes to the hold feature, there's one thing that the Fellow does better than the Willsence. For some reason, the Willsence will not allow you to hold a temperature at 96 degrees Celsius or higher. In the manual, it says it's a safety feature. I don't know why it's a safety feature, but it's very annoying that it won't hold temperature at that level. One of the other annoying features with the hold functionality is that every single time you turn the kettle on, you have to press the hold button in order to get it to hold. So every time you turn the kettle off, it'll reset that hold function. And then when you turn it on, you have to reset the hold. The Fellow, it remembers that you want to hold it. There is one more difference between these two kettles. And unfortunately for the Fellow, in my opinion, it is the largest and most important. And that's the pour. The Fellow Stagg EKG was specifically designed for pour over coffee, which you do very slowly, and because of that, they put a very thin neck on this gooseneck kettle. Whereas on the Willsence, they made it thicker. This means you can pour it a lot faster. Now, when you're brewing tea, this can make a large difference based on the size of the vessel that you are brewing in. On this 90 milliliter teapot, it might not be that big of a deal, because the Fellow can fill it up in approximately 7 seconds, whereas the Willsence can fill it up in 1 to 2 seconds. But when you're brewing in larger vessels, it's going to be much more noticeable. This is a 300 milliliter pot, and I'm going to fill it up using both kettles so that you can see just how stark of a difference it is. And I'm going to grab my timer and time both of them. So let's reset this to 0. And here we go. I'm going to start pouring with the Fellow first. So there the time goes, and I'm pouring it as fast as I can here. And one of the other things is you get really anxious trying to pour it faster, and so sometimes you tip it too far, and some of the water will come out of the lid. So here we go. We're almost there. And we're at the top. So on the clock, I have 24 seconds. When you're brewing tea in here, you really have to take that 24 seconds of time into account and adjust your brewing parameters to offset that. Now let's see how long it takes with the Willsence. Let's reset to 0 here and begin to pour. As you can see, the water's coming out much faster. And we're done. It was actually on 7 seconds, but 8 seconds. You get the point. Basically, the Willsence pours 3 times faster than the Fellow. This might not be a big deal to some people, but it's a huge deal to me. It can be very frustrating when you're trying to pour into those vessels and it's just not going very quickly. It's a very irritating feeling when you're trying to brew some tea. With that being the largest negative with the Fellow, but having the large positive of its beauty, which one would I recommend between these two? Now, fortunately, I own both now, so I can keep this one on display, and anytime I'm brewing in a larger vessel, I can pull this one out. But if you're going to choose between the two, just because the Willsence is so much cheaper now, I think you get more value out of it. Also, it's not an ugly kettle. So just because it's not as beautiful as the Fellow doesn't mean it looks bad. It just doesn't look as good. So simply due to the pour of the kettle itself, I would recommend this one. It seems to have held up very well over the last few weeks that I've been using it. If there's anything else you'd like to know about these two kettles, let me know in the comments and I'll try to get back to any of your questions. Until next time, everyone, enjoy your own tea journey. Have a good one. Bye.